I'm really, really excited because we've been working on this for a long, long time, and so have they. So Jodi has been actually the PACE administrator ever since 2018 with the Port Authority, and they're finally looking towards residential. And we're talking about finding a way to increase the value of your property, increase the worth of your property without blank dollars to dollars going into it. So I'm really excited to introduce to you from the Port Authority, Jodi Rabquer.
Hi. Well, thank you so much for the warm welcome, and what a great opportunity to be here. What a great group. And I'm going to say right up front, I'm newer in this speaking role, so I have some notes, so you're just going to have to excuse that because they're going to be here. Really excited to have the opportunity to talk about our program and how we can work with you. So first of all, I am the PACE administrator. I'll talk about what PACE means in a minute. And the Port Authority, you might wonder what's the role of the Port Authority in this. So I've been here for a year and a half, and the Port Authority, when I first started, I was amazed at all of the different roles that we have, all the different areas that that the port touches. And maybe you guys are more familiar, but if you're not, I'm going to give you a little history. So the Toledo-Lucas County Port Authority was the first port in Ohio. We were established in 1955. It was also about the same time that the St. Lawrence Seaway opened up. So when you think of Port Authority, if you've got off of I-280 over on Front Street, you see those signs that point to the Port Authority, and you think seaport. So we do own the seaport. We don't manage the seaport. There's other companies that manage that seaport. There's 61 port authorities in Ohio. Many of them only have business development functions. Many of them don't have a seaport or an airport. So I talked a little bit about the seaport already. We also have a foreign trade zone. We were the 8th national foreign trade zone. This is an area where companies can come in international, bring their products, and they can either defer, reduce, or eliminate some U.S. customs on their products. So we were the 8th one to do that in 1960. We do not own, but we do manage the 2 airports in Toledo. The city of Toledo actually owns the airports, but we run those. We do own the Martin Luther King Jr. train station. So the Greyhound runs out of there, Amtrak runs out of there. So we're kind of all over in the transportation area. And then we also work with real estate development. So I understand a lot of people here are residential owners, but we also work with commercial. My presentation, don't be put off at the beginning. I'm going to talk a lot about commercial, but everything I'm talking about is going to, we're launching a residential program that will, it'll mirror this commercial program. So when I'm talking commercial, don't think this isn't going to apply to you. So we do have the Better Buildings program is what I'll be talking about in a minute, but we also have done a lot of brownfield remediation. So if you think of the old Overland site, Jeep, where there used to be Jeep before the new plant, and then it sat for quite a while as just a brownfield. We bought that, did a lot of remediation, and if you've been by there recently, you'll see lots of buildings started with Dana, and then followed by DMX. Axiom is there. So pretty exciting to see what's going on and what the Port Authority's doing. Also, the old Chevron plant, I guess it would be called, is where Cleveland Cliffs is now, going in a $700 billion project. So $700 million, dollar project, but pretty exciting stuff happening in Toledo. And we were part of cleaning that up and making that a usable site again. And then we have financing tools as well. So we do have fixed and variable rate revenue bonds that we offer through our Northwest Ohio Bond Fund. We have capital lease transactions, and we're able to help companies come in and save on sales tax when they're doing buildings. So we worked with Anderson's, we worked with ProMedica downtown. They're able to save on sales tax on their building products, the supplies. At the top, we talk about the 575 projects that we've helped finance. We've helped create or retain 19,000 jobs and provided over $2 billion of funding. So when I first started with the Port Authority, you think seaport, maybe airport, but didn't realize how many other things they're also involved in. We also have infrastructure financing. We do have the Ohio Regional 166 loans and the Small Business Association 504 loans. That's for companies that have equipment, that want to finance equipment. They offer long-term fixed rates for those components. And we also have micro loans. We have diversified contractor loans to help contractors that are just trying to get started, to help them play on an even field. So a lot of really cool programs. And I have brochures if anybody's interested in these other programs. But what I really want to talk about today is the Better Buildings Northwest Ohio. And I apologize, I keep turning around and looking at my slides, but you just have a newbie here tonight. So the Better Buildings program is a Toledo-Lucas County Port Authority program. It started in 2011. We received a grant from the Department of Energy, a $15 million grant, and it was to help buildings become more energy efficient and help finance that through this grant. We wanted this to be a sustainable program, so we took $7.5 million, half of the grant, and used it for a reserve for our bond fund to make sure that this would be sustainable. We took $3 million of that and created a revolving loan fund, and then the rest was used to get the projects started, to cover the costs that were associated with that, and the energy audits, things like that. So we do have the revolving loan fund, and we also have issued 7 different bonds to finance projects totaling over $40 million, about 150 different projects in and around Toledo. So this is, again, commercial, and hang with me if you're on the residential side, we'll get there. So what we're able to do is, again, it's a financing, it's not a grant, it does have to be paid back, but it is a financing tool where we're able to finance we're able to offer long-term, low-cost financing, fixed rate for projects that conserve energy. So that can be buildings that are currently built. It can also be for new construction. And it just has to show that there is an energy savings component. So when we're talking in the residential market, things like your insulation, your heating, your air conditioning, your doors and windows, things like that can qualify. So also, I know that we talked about solar. So solar can qualify as well. I know that's something that's kind of a hot topic right now, and I know there's some energy tax credits out there as well that people are getting more interested in the solar. So that is something that can qualify as well. So I have this slide that talks about what an energy improvement district is, energy special improvement district. So Ohio has special improvement districts, and I like to use the story of, I owned a house in Sylvania Township, and they wanted to put in a new sewer line, and everybody had to pay for their portion of that. And we were able to either pay for that up front, or we could use, they had a special improvement district that we were able to finance that and pay back the cost of that sewer line over 20 years by putting a special assessment on our taxes. And we chose that option. And the nice thing was that in 7 years, or whenever it was that I decided to move, I didn't take the sewer line with me. And so that stayed, and the assessment stayed with the property where the improvement was made. And this is the same type of a process that the energy special improvement districts work with. It kind of layers right on top of that legislation It's Ohio Revised Code 1710, if anyone really is interested in reading that. It's where property owners are able to petition and say, I want to make these energy improvements, and it's a voluntary assessment that the improvements are provided, or the funding is provided by placing a special assessment on the taxes. And we work with Anita's office often on that. They're great at working with us and making sure all that paperwork happens. It is a legislative action, but it's voluntary, and then the improvements are paid back semi-annually through the taxes. So again, it gives property owners the ability to make these energy improvements, and it is again paid through the assessment. So, but a district has to be set up first. So we have at the Port Authority, when we started this program in 2011, we worked with the city of Toledo. That was the first PACE district in the state of Ohio. And we worked with the city of Toledo, actually, and did a retrofit. If you remember, in 2011, the economy not that great, but they had a lot of aging buildings that needed energy efficiency upgrades. So we worked with them to improve 55 of their buildings. And the district can be expanded. You can set up new districts, or an existing district can be expanded as long as it's contiguous. So up here I have our Northwest Ohio Advanced Energy Improvement District is the district that encompasses Toledo. And as we have projects, you have to have a sponsoring project in each contiguous area, then you can expand the district. So as long as there's a district in place, we can offer the residential PACE as well. If there isn't a district in place, we can set one up, but it has to have a sponsoring project. So we have also worked with other outlying municipalities to set up districts. Typically we stay within Northwest Ohio, but we have worked with places. Beechwood is over near Cleveland, and Dayton, we worked with them back in the beginning to get their districts set up so they could offer that to their constituents as well. And again, I said we financed over 150 projects, more than $40 million, and the statewide has not been launched yet. We're actually working on that and anticipating that will launch in March. So it's coming next month. So the features here, again, this is on the commercial side. Residential may look a little different, but actually residential will look a little different, because in commercial we typically finance for long-term fixed rates up to 15 years. So you know what your rate is going to be for 15 years. It's not like a bank is going to come and they reset the rate maybe every 5 years, or they're not going to give you a 15-year rate for your air conditioner usually. But the residential program has terms up to 25 years. So that'll be one difference. We're able to finance up to 100% of the cost. So in the commercial realm, where you have maybe an architect or engineer, any of the financing costs, an energy audit, equipment costs, labor, all of that can be financed. And so no money out of pocket. So it's not where you have to put a certain amount down. Everything can be included in the financing. And the goal, especially in the commercial realm, is that the improvements, the savings that you see from the maintenance and the energy savings are going to help pay for that assessment. So a lot of times building owners are either cash flow positive or cash flow neutral. So that's a really exciting thing to see. You're going to increase the value of the buildings and have the amount paid for, the assessment paid for by those savings that they see. And it can be used with the incentives and the rebates. So I know First Energy has some tax incentives right now, and there's other maybe manufacturer rebates as well. You can use those and apply those as well. And I always I'm not a huge proponent of having a lot of debt, so I always say take the amount, take all of those rebates and incentives and finance the lower amount. But you don't have to. If you want to take a trip to Hawaii, we can't stop you from doing that. So it's totally up to you. And again, this is the commercial side. We typically look at projects between $25,000 and up to $10 million. The residential, that will be different. I think the minimum residential is going to be $2,500. So why do building owners like PACE? So PACE, I don't know if I said this, Property Assessed Clean Energy is what PACE stands for. And it preserves owner equity, it preserves some of your cash. If you have a lending line with your bank and we can take part of that, you might be at a ceiling with what the bank's willing to lend, we can take the energy component of that out and finance that, so it gives you a little more flexibility with your lender. Again, the savings are going to decrease the future expense, and it's going to increase your property value, which I guess you'd have to decide with the auditor's office on that property value thing, as they were talking about, but we want our properties to have value, right? And so if in the commercial world, if you have the triple net lease, or even in the residential world, you build in that cost to your, the cost of the real estate taxes into your rent rate. So it can be covered by that as well, and your tenants are going to be happier. They're living in a better place with better amenities as well. Again, we talked about it being paid back semi-annually through the special assessment, and improvements can transfer with the property. That may or may not be what you want as a residential owner. You know, if you decide to sell, maybe you don't want an assessment on the property. The residential is going to have a total prepayment option. The commercial, we fund through bond funding. It's not as easily available on that, so typically there isn't a prepayment option on the commercial side, but for the residential, that is not a problem. But if you wanted it to stay and sell the property with it on it, it has the improvements there. It's just something that would have to be negotiated in the price and make sure that your buyer would know about it. And then again, it's an easy documentation process. We will be working with, actually on the residential side, I'll talk a little bit. Renovate America is the company that we're working with, and they'll actually be working with different contractors. So if you guys have your favorite contractors, or if you are a contractor and you're reputable and honest, we want those people signed up with us. And it's a tool that they'll be able to work with their customers as well and offer this financing option when they're out talking to owners that want to make these upgrades. So it's a pretty simple process. We take care of all the paperwork. We take care of it as a legislated act, so it goes before City Council. We take care of all of that as well. So again, what types of buildings? We talked about, again, this is focused on the commercial, but we actually have started a residential program as a pilot project through the Lucas County Land Bank. So we've been doing that since 2016. And it's really exciting to see some of the stories. I don't work with the clients typically because the land bank handles all of the paperwork and it does the face-to-face with them. But it's pretty exciting. They put a video out on, I think it was Facebook, maybe 6 months ago or so. And it was a building owner, or a homeowner, just talking about how it was such a exciting thing for her to be able to make these improvements in a way that she wouldn't have maybe had cash to do this. So again, with the other types of buildings, though, we can work with industrial, commercial, government. I talked about the city of Toledo, educational and healthcare, and there's very few things we can't do. We can't do houses of worship. We can't do swimming pools and golf courses. Casinos, I think, is another one. So all other properties qualify. And here's a list of, again, more commercial type retrofits and energy projects that we see. Lighting is a big, easy one for commercial because upgrading to LED lighting is such a quick payback. We see payback generally between 2 and 7 years, depending on if it's just upgrading the lamps or upgrading the full fixtures. Again, HVAC, getting those more efficient systems, insulation, building envelope, things like that. And then energy projects, waste energy recovery, some building controls updates, the combined heat and power systems, some microturbines are kind of cool, and seeing in some of these bigger commercial applications that are able to use those. But again, in the residential world, we look at more windows, doors, insulation. Roofing sometimes can qualify, heating and air. So again, what makes a good energy efficiency project? And that's looking at buildings that are more than 5 years old or that have been 5 years or more since they have had renovations or recommissioning. If you know there's existing system deficiencies, actually I do own a rental house that is, it has a boiler, and I never had a house with a boiler before, and it was a little scary to me, like not really sure what how to take care of this, but this is an option too, to be able to, if I know that this is older, I can use this type of financing to make that upgrade, and I don't have to have any money out of my pocket. If you have high energy bills or high consumption in the building, especially in the commercial world, if we're looking at manufacturing or where there's high occupancy, 24/7 operations, 2 to 3 shifts a day, those are great ways to, great candidates to see where you can make some of these energy efficiency upgrades. So those are great projects. New construction can qualify. I'm not sure exactly how that qualifies on the residential side yet. In the commercial world, the way that it works is the energy improvements have to be higher than, the energy efficiency has to be higher than the minimum building code. So we look at what the building code is, and if you have a more efficient furnace that you're putting in, or lighting, or whatever the improvement is, it just has to be higher than the minimum building code. So it can also be part of a larger capital stack. Again, I talked about maybe the bank, you've hit a ceiling, or the bank, you're working with different funders and they don't want to fund 100%, or there's even equity requirements. This can take that gap and fill that gap, so we pull out what the energy portion of your investment it is and finance that portion. And how does it work? So this again is geared toward commercial. So I'll talk about that, and then I'll talk about the residential. The commercial, we have an application online at our website, and I have that up here, and I have handouts here if anybody wants copies of these. We are looking for the scope of the work. What are you asking to have financed? What's the useful life? Who's the contractor? Is there a contract already? And we need some sort of energy savings calculation. And then we also are looking at, for 3 years of business financials, we're looking for a market value, because we're able to, on the commercial side, lend up to 30% of the building's value. So you'd want an appraisal. Typically, the auditor value is going to be lower than a market value. So, but if there's not an appraisal, we have to use the market value, or we have to use the auditor value. And we have to identify, like, when is the funding needed. There's an agreement to be assessed and a lender consent. We do work with the banks because we take a tax lien position, and we want to make sure that the bank, if there's a mortgage, is aware that we're there and get their consent. It's not a law, it's not required, but it's a courtesy that it's a good practice. That's what we do. And we take care of all the city assessment process. Now, for the residential, that will be running through Renovate America. You can go online once it launches. It will be available to go online through their website, and you can find contractors that work with the program. And again, we're still signing up contractors, so if there's good contractors that you've worked with or that you are and you'd recommend, we'd like to have you in our database. There is a big vetting process, so we want to make sure we're working with good contractors. Everybody knows there's bad contractors out there. We don't want them in our database. So, that process is going to be a little bit different. There are going to be the consumer protection. I want to talk about that for just a minute. Renovate America was one of the first residential PACE providers. They're the largest. California was the first state to offer residential. Ohio will be the fourth. So Ohio, Florida, and Missouri, in addition to California. Renovate America learned the hard way. So they started in 2011, and we're working with contractors. They were the ones that were out promoting the program. If you type in Renovate America Residential on YouTube, you're going to find a lot of videos for shady contractors that took advantage. And maybe I signed up your mother for solar for $40,000, and she didn't know what she was getting into, and thought maybe it was a grant, or and then the tax bill comes and she can't pay her taxes. So there are those horror stories out there. So I just like to address it up front, but we're making sure all these consumer protections are in place before we roll out the program. So we had hoped to launch in third quarter and then fourth quarter, and now we're first quarter, but we want to make sure that all of the protections are in place and people aren't going to be taken advantage of. So let's see. I do have some case studies here. These are all commercial, but I'll go through them kind of quickly because I think it's kind of cool to see what types of buildings have used our program. So Mommy Assembly and Stamping, if you're all from around this area. I do want to say we are licensed, we are able to work in Ohio only. So we can't cross that state line. So if you have property in Michigan, unfortunately it doesn't qualify, but we are able to work throughout the entire state of Ohio. So Mommy Stamping, I love this project because if you see they had a $3.9 million project, and I love that they are still functioning to begin with, because if you remember, the Ford plant that was there closed, and that could have been just a big vacant factory. So I love that they're there. I love that that they're energy minded, and so they did a $3.9 million project, and they're saving 33% of their energy. So their assessment is $377,000 a year, and they're saving $640,000 a year on their energy savings. So it's pretty exciting. I think I'm too close to that speaker. B&B Molded Products is a manufacturer in Defiance, Ohio. They used $1.4 million of financing, and they relocated from Napoleon to Defiance, and were able to use PACE to fill a gap in another stack with other conventional financing. Wanamaker is a organization or a company in Lima. They took an old warehouse and repurposed it for a food manufacturing. They do spray drying. So again, it filled a gap in a conventional stack, so we were able to pull out those energy costs. So some nonprofit facilities. Bluffton Family Recreation is a rec center in Bluffton, of course, and they had a smaller project, $84,000. But my favorite one, I think, is the YMCA. This was one that we just worked on. They're just finishing the upgrades. I don't know if anyone's a Y member, but they used 4 of their locations, and actually they're getting complaints that the lights are too bright now. You could hardly see they were dirty. They were pretty dim, but what I love about this project is they're netting over $90,000 in savings that they're able to then put back into their programs. And the Y has such amazing programs, whether it's for kids or for seniors that might not get out aside from going there. It just is a really cool opportunity. A new construction project we did was the Liberty Ridge Apartments down in Findlay area, they used it again as part of a capital stack, but we financed the energy portion of this apartment complex. I think the bottom one here is Torrey Hill Apartments, another apartment complex they were able to use for HVAC installation, doors, windows. Here's our government, and again, I talked about the city of Toledo. That was our first bond that we issued in the, I think, 55 buildings. The city of Oregon, they used that for other things as well, but they also used geothermal. So that was our, I think, first geothermal project. Springfield Township, they did the administration building. They also did 3 of their fire stations. So used it for the governmental as well. Toledo School for the Arts was able to finance $1.3 million. They used it for a lot of their HVAC boilers, so their air quality, and it was a $1.3 million project. The Barone brothers have 3 medical buildings next to the old Andersons over at Talmadge and what is that? Yeah, or Lasky over in that area. So they did a $1.8 million project there, 3 of their buildings, so pretty exciting. Again, annual projected savings here is $170,000, so pretty exciting. The PNC Bank downtown, they had some old chillers that were going out and going bad, so used PACE to finance the replacement of that. Findlay Surgical Center is an outpatient surgery center. Merritt House, assisted living facility, so we can use it in the healthcare as well. Some of the small businesses, Barron's Lawn and Landscape, Radon Environmental. My favorite one for the small business is Follow and Fodder. I hate seeing these old boarded up buildings, and I love seeing when they're not old and boarded up. And I spend way too much money there because they're pretty close to our office, so I walk there. And Beauty Bar, they did a small project with us, $27,000, but replacing their HVAC systems. And then we did a couple of quite large solar projects. With solar on commercial, people think, well, I can maybe generate a little more solar and sell back to the grid. It doesn't work that way in Ohio. The legislation, it doesn't allow that. So we are able to finance solar, but it has to be behind the grid. So it has to be to power the facility. So we can, and again, on the residential side, solar can qualify if you're powering your house. And we did, again, City of Oregon had the geothermal project. I already talked about the HERO program through Renovate America. Again, we're hoping to launch that in March. We just had meetings today on who's doing what and how all of this is going to work, but I know everybody's pretty excited to get that launched. We just want to do it right the first time. So, any questions?
What's the, on the commercial one, it started at 25,000 and went up, is that the same for residential?
No, I think residential is 2,500 is where it's gonna start. And I know we see nationally, or in the 3 states that are already up, the average assessment is, size is between 11 and 17,000, somewhere in there.
One moment.
Okay, so on, I had a few questions. So on the residential loans, are they looking at, to get these, you fill out applications, are they looking at your credit, or is it based on the value of the property?
Okay, so it's sort of 2 criteria. So I talked about the commercial, we're able to loan up to 30% of the value. The residential is more on the 20%, so we're looking at 20% of the value of the property, and there is the credit score of the owner. It's a 620 or higher, so it's not you don't have to have an 800s credit score, but we also want to make sure we're not we don't want to be loan sharks.
How fast does it take to get the money?
So for the residential, my understanding is it's going to be really fast. So we have a bond, and the funds will be available. But we know if you're, and I know this is a different population, but in the regular residential, if your furnace goes out, you don't want to wait 2 months to be able to pay to replace that. So there is a 3-day waiting period that also can be waived for people that need the financing right away. So my understanding is it's going to be really quick.
Okay, so we could use this when we buy our houses to rehab them,
Yes,
and then we pay it over a period of time.
yes. Right, and again,
Okay.
the span for residential is between 5 and 25 years. Again, it goes with the life of the asset. So if you have an asset that's, got a 5-year life, we can't finance it for 25 years. It
Yeah.
has to go with the life of the asset, but,
Sure. Okay.
yeah. The interest rates on the residential are going to be a little bit different. There are some additional fees that are built in. However, with the commercial, we have bond issuance fees. So there's some fees that are an ongoing, like an assessment collection fee. I think it's about $95 a year. The interest rate itself, it varies, but it's going to be competitive, is what I'm told here. Yeah. The goal is to be competitive, yeah. I don't know rates right now because, again, we haven't launched yet, but yes.
You had said that this was repaid out of taxes on the property.
Yes.
Now, is there a way to pay additional to pay it off early?
Yeah, so again, and I want to be careful because I probably say the wrong words, but it's actually a special assessment on the property. It's not actually the tax on the property. On the commercial side, there isn't really a prepayment because we issue through bonds. On the residential side, yes, if you want to pay down or early pay off or prepay, that is going to be an option. So, my whole goal personally is to have my house paid for as soon as possible. And so I want that gone. And so I pay extra every month. That's going to be an option as well for the residential portion of this program. Anyone else?
So if we want to do this today, are we not able to because you're not quite up and running?
We're not quite up and running yet. And again, it will be launched hopefully in March is the goal date. I can't say if that's going to be closer to March 1st or March 31st, but the goal is to have everything up and running in March. And I know I had a slide in here that was talking about the energy special improvement districts. We have the commercial districts set up. We are working, when I have the Toledo and the contiguous areas, we've been working with our districts that have the commercial set up to make sure that they have the residential layered on top of it. So it's going to be available in those areas, but it does have to be where there's a district set up. But if there's not one, we can work to get those set up as well.
Somebody else just went right out of my head.
I think right behind you.
So you were talking a lot about the stuff for commercial, but like on the residential side, windows, doors, electrical, all that would fall under
As long
energy
as we can
improvements?
show that there's an energy savings component, and actually Renovate America has this great database, and they're able to tell, things that are above the minimum building code for those. So, I mean, if you want to upgrade it doesn't have to show a specific percentage. It doesn't have to be like a 15% or higher energy improvement, but as long as it's more efficient than what the minimum building code requires.
Do you have a list somewhere, or will you have a list somewhere?
I
of, like, all
don't,
that?
but there will be a list on the Renovate America site. But if you give me your information, I'd be happy to keep you on I have a list of people that are interested, and I, want to make sure I get the information out once it's launched.
Okay.
I'd be happy to give you that
Okay,
once
thank
we get it launched.
So you'll have a sign-up sheet for anybody here that wants to get on that list?
Yes. Anybody that wants to get on the list, I have a notebook here. If you just give me your name and email address or name, phone number, whatever, however you want to be contacted, I'd be happy to share that information once we get launched.
And also, will they assign somebody to work with you, like, it's not just a reject or accept, they might say, this part we wouldn't be able to finance because X, Y, Z, but, somebody that'll work with you?
Yes, my understanding, so we're the program administrator. Renovate America is who we're partnering with. They provide the staff that can walk through all of this. They provide the database as well to say, this qualifies, this type of furnace, this model number qualifies, but this doesn't, and here's why. Yes. Any question in the back?
Yeah, so is there term limits on this loan? So if we get the money from Land Bank, and I own the home and I'm renting it out, I had to keep it rented for 3 or 4 years, so I can't sell it and, get the money to rehab. Is there any conditions like that? Generally, you get money, you gotta hold it for a little bit or rent it or so forth, so that's my question. If I get the rehab's money, can I immediately sell and, pay back Land Bank at closing and go from there, or is there some term limits?
To my understanding, no, there's not term limits. So again, if you get the financing and you make the rehab and you want to sell tomorrow, you can. There's not a requirement to hold. Is that what your question is? Yes. So no, there is not that requirement. Anybody else? It stays with the property. Again, it's kind of one that it can be a two-edged sword, It can be a positive if you want to sell and keep it that way, which is what I did with my sewer line. But it has to be disclosed. So obviously, the person buying the property needs to know that there's an assessment on the property, and that is something that's recorded, so it should show up on a title search, and so it shouldn't be anything hidden. But some property owners might want to pay it off because they don't want that on there. The buyer, it makes it less attractive to a buyer. But it depends on how much it is and who your buyer is.
I have the mic, so I have the next question. Is there a limit on the number of loans?
No, because it goes with the parcel. So it goes with the parcel, so it's based on the value of the parcel. It's because we're backed by the property, so we're backed by the value of the property. So, and obviously, it goes by your credit score, but. So I'm not sure how FICO works exactly, how that affects the FICO scores, but I know it's based on the FICO 620 or higher is how that. So we're personally guaranteeing a loan, or is there property guarantee? It's the property. Oh, okay. Yep, there's not a personal guarantee, it's the property. But you have to. For the property. Yeah, right, and again, it goes by what the property value is, so it could be based on Aries, what Aries says, or if you purchased it and have an appraisal, that might be different than Aries, we can use either one, whichever one is going to be more.
So if your house is on Aries at 15,000, and we fight tooth and nail to get our property loan.
Exactly.
Is it 20% of that 15,000? But she's saying you could get an appraisal, so we have to give an appraisal.
But if you have an appraisal that shows, I'm on that same thing. You always want your property valued low until you go to sell, right? So, okay.
Will it show up on a credit report?
I do not believe it shows up on the credit report because it's an assessment on the taxes. So it's not a personal debt like a credit card would be or a loan, like a bank loan.
One moment.
Thanks. Is there an income situation? So like if we had 10 houses and we've got various loans, are you like balancing those loans against our income of some kind or something since there's a credit requirement?
I am not 100% sure on that. Again, we're still learning everything. My understanding was everything was based on the credit score, but I don't know how it works with an investor situation. But that's something I could investigate and get an answer to for you. Write it on my list, because I'll forget. Anybody else? Well, thank you so much for bearing through my ums and ahs. I'm not a great public speaker.
You don't have to be a public speaker when you have good product, right?
Good,
Okay. And we're asking a lot of the county agencies to come to the trade fair also, so that you can ask any questions you want once you start looking into this. Thank you, everybody. We're going to Dorr Street Cafe if you'd like to join us. We bring speakers along. Are you invited? All right. Okay. So they'll be there so that you can ask questions of them also. Thank you very much for coming tonight.